Hi everyone, I'm Sandy from Stamped Impression. Thank you for joining me today. What I'm going to discuss this morning is the tools that you need to get started in making hand stamped cards. It can be a little overwhelming when you attend one of my classes and I start pulling out tools and talking about different things. You may not own all of them, and while I'd be happy if you bought them all from me, it's really not realistic to start with a huge amount of tools. So I'm going to talk about what you actually need to get started and some options you can try before you start using Stampin' Up! Products. In time though, you'll probably add to it and will replace your homegrown tools with Stampin' Up! Items, but you can get started with much less. Let me show you how. So let me begin by turning my camera down to my work table. Alright then, let's get started. Here is a list of the 7 basic tools you need for making a hand stamp card. You need stamps, and those will include the images, which are pictures and or words that you're going to put on your cards. Ink, that is the way you're going to apply those images and words in color. Cleaner, well, that's to clean the ink off your stamps when you're done. Paper, and that includes cardstock. This is where you're going to stamp your images and words. Cutting tool to cut that paper down to the size that you need. Adhesive, where you have more than one layer of paper, that is how you're going to glue it together. And an envelope to put it in. So let's take a look at these 7 items a little bit more slowly. First of all, stamps. Stampin' Up! Has 2 different kinds of stamps. And when I say stamp, I also mean a block, an acrylic block. Okay, the stamps. We have photopolymer stamps, which are clear. And we have what we call cling stamps, which are made with red rubber, and those are not clear. See, the red rubber, the cling, has a layer of rubber, some foam for a little give, and a label, a sticky label. So those are the stamps, but to work with them you actually need blocks, and I like to use the acrylic blocks that Stampin' Up! Has. First of all, they're see-through, which means you can see where you're putting things. There are no sharp corners, so you will not cut or hurt your fingers. And there's an indentation on every side, so that makes a good place for you to hang on to the block when you're working. To apply the stamp to the block, you leave it on your paper, face down, so the part that will get the ink, which I refer to as a bumpy side, is down. Put the block over it, press ever so gently, and lift up. Pretty easy, and then you can see how to stamp. I just want to give you one word of warning about these stamps, the cling stamps. The labels are very sticky. And if you just yank it off the block, you will leave behind the label and probably part of the foam. So make sure to use a tool or your nail and get under that rubber, under that label when you're taking it off. Okay, ink. Most of the time I will be using classic stamping pads. And if you're taking one of my classes, I will recommend colors to you. The classic stamping pads come in these boxes. It comes with a bunch of labels. The label for the color I put on the end here, and the other one, which is just blank, I put on the inside. So when these are sitting on your work table, if you've got a few open, you can see what color you're working with. So to stamp with these are made of foam, so they're a little squishy. I do a tap, 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 and then, whoops, and let me get out some paper, which is number 4 on the list. Tap, 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 and apply the stamp. A couple of things I wanted to say, just to, because I never mentioned it in one of my other videos. I usually open these on the side with the printed label by pulling them apart. There is another way if that's too hard on your fingers. I just push down and it pops up. Sometimes it pops up more. There's a sweet spot. I don't do it often, so I always forget where it is. But if you do these often, whoops, you will see that, find that sweet spot, and just it pops up, and you can just take it apart. All right, so there we have stamps, ink, paper, and I skipped over the cleaner. If you're new to stamping, what I did for the first couple of years, I would take a paper towel, fold it in four, wet it thoroughly, and keep it on a salad plate. And then I would take my stamp and just squish it in there and then pat it dry on another paper towel. So you can do that. That will save you a little bit of money for getting started. But there's no getting around the stamps, a block, and the ink. Okay, the cutting tool. Most of our cardstock that I use on cards comes in sheets that are 8.5 by 11, the same size as some printer paper. Even a card base is done with a half of a sheet. So you need a way to cut your paper. You could use a pair of scissors. You can use, and I assume everyone has scissors. You can use a hobby blade and a straight edge. So that's, you should be able to have some things around in your house for getting started for cutting. Adhesive, people use all kinds of adhesive. The kids glue, you know, you need something that's double-sided so that you don't want tape over the edge, but on the back. So glue is usually the most common thing. And then you need an envelope. And the envelopes are called A2, that's the size. It's just a little bit bigger than your cardstock, which would make the card base. So 4/4 of a sheet of typing paper, which is 4¼ by 5.5. So it's a smidge more. I think it's 4¾ by 5 5/8 or something like that, 5¾ Anyways, it's called A2. And that's all you need. You need stamp, ink, paper, a cleaner, a cutting tool, adhesive, and an envelope. And that's the best way to get started. All right, now that you know about the 7 basic tools, let's look at some of the tool bundles I've put together. These are available typically when I'm offering an online class to my class attendees. I offer it at a slight discount. I cover the at this point in time, when I first introduce them, I cover the shipping and sales tax as a way of helping you get started in stamping. Anyways, I've divided into 3 bundles, and you can buy any or all of the bundles as you see fit and your budget allows. So the first bundle is contains many of the basic items. So one of the things I've included in there, is a pack of our basic white cardstock. It's 8.5 by 11, so one sheet of the cardstock can be cut in half, and you can use it for 2 card bases. The reason I'm recommending this cardstock is that when you take a class of mine, all your solid cardstock is pre-cut for you and will be used up in the class. And then I also give you some designer series paper maybe, or some other embellishments, and you can use that to make more cards. If you have some white paper, then you have a basic color that you can work with on anything. So that's why I chose white. We have more than one kind of white paper. The reason I chose the basic white, it has kind of a smooth finish to it. It's very nice, and it accepts the ink really well. So it is my favorite cardstock from Stampin' Up! For stamping. In addition to the white cardstock, I also suggest a block size. It's called a block D. The Stampin' Up! Acrylic blocks come in different sizes. This is size D, and it's about just over 2.5 by almost 3 inches, and it's good for most of our stamps. And I just think it's a good size because so many stamps can be used with it. We have a whole set of acrylic blocks that come in different sizes. This is a good starting size. I also suggest that you get 2 colors of ink. If you're taking a class, I will always have 2 or 3 ink colors in the class. Pick 2 at least to get started with your class. So that's also a good option. And the last part of this pack is is some glue and a silicone craft mat. I just want to say one thing about the glue. This is made by Tombow, but sold through Stampin' Up. It's called Multi-Purpose Liquid Glue, and it is great. It accepts the the glue. I always glue on it. Glue will stick to it, but not hard, so that when you're done, you can just use your finger and rub it off, or you can use a wet cloth and clean it up. It keeps the glue off your work area, and you can get close to the edge of your cardstock. So if I want to glue this piece of cardstock, do you see how close I am to the edge? And oh look, I got off a little bit. But it doesn't stick to the wrong side of the glue. It either sticks to the cardstock or to the mat, so it keeps your area nice and neat, and you can just glue that on. I want to say another thing about the glue. There's a skinny end, which has a skinny line of glue. Maybe you can see it better on the craft mat. And at the other end, there's a fat dispenser for when you want to get a lot of coverage. Whoops. You know, it's a thicker line. So if you're gluing a bigger piece of cardstock, you may want to use that. Anyways, there's some glue, and I'm just going to stick it on there. Easy peasy. This keeps your craft area neat. When it's dry, you can just rub your finger on it, and it just balls up, and you can, whoops, except if you're messing around here, you can just ball it up and throw it out. Another thing, if there's old glue on your silicone craft mat, during the pandemic crisis, I discovered that if you use a little bit of hand sanitizer, it will clean up really nicely. So that's the first pack, the first bundle of tools I suggest. So a block D, Whisper White, you can't see me pointing out off camera, Whisper White cardstock, a couple of ink pads, a silicone graph sheet, and your glue. All right, that is option 1. Option 2 is a little bit more robust. So one of the things I suggest is a block E for those bigger sentiments. This is, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4.5 by 3.5. So it's much bigger, and it handles bigger stamps. So block D. Another thing I suggest is a stamping pierce tool. This is an old product of Stampin' Up! That they were going to get rid of. We used to use it for piercing our paper. It was a very fashionable thing to do, but it also has some foam. When you stamp, you really need a little bit of give. The cling stamps have foam between the rubber and the label or the block, so they have a little bit of foam. It gives you a sharper image. The photopolymer stamps do not have that, so it's best if you have something with a little give underneath. So what I would do is I would have my cardstock, and I would ink it up and then just stamp here. So there's a little bit of give from here. Obviously I did not clean that very well. So a stamping pierce tool is quite useful. I also suggest, since you would have a couple of colors of ink, maybe get the Memento Tuxedo Black ink. This is also made by someone else but sold through Stampin' Up! Black is a good basic color to have. Just want to warn you, it is not a foam mat like the Stampin' Up! Classic stamping ink pads. It has it's a hard mat. I don't want to, there's no way to show you, but you could feel it when you stamp. So if you're going to stamp with it, oh, I guess I do need that mat. Instead of just the tap, 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 you would do a little bit of a rub, 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 tap, tap, and then stamp. Okay, and I did that kind of messy. How's that for a neater one? See, I push too hard and I have a little splashing. That's why we work on scrap paper before we go to our good cardstock. So Tuxedo Black is a good starting ink. And also we have some specialty glues. So we have what are called Stampin' Dimensionals, and those are foam adhesive. So let me just take one off and put it on my cardstock. So there's wax paper on the bottom and there's wax paper on the top. And then if you want to glue something, pull off that wax paper on top, and it just pops up the cardstock a little bit. Can you see that? So it just adds a little dimension, just gives a little depth. So they're Stampin' Dimensionals, and I use them a lot. I always have a few packs in the house. And finally, mini glue dots. They come on a roll, and they're small dots of adhesive. They're good for tiny pieces, and they're also good for sticking your ribbon and other embellishments onto your cardstock. When it's cardstock or paper against paper, the multi-purpose glue is just fine, but if it's ribbon against paper, I would use a mini glue dot. So, and I just want to say this is an old one because I always have a few in the house. I understand. So the glue is always, the little dots are always on the roll, and you just roll back, and to use them, you press your cardstock on, and then it lifts the glue dot right off. Now the glue is on the piece that rolls off, so you hold it this way and then put your cardstock against it. It's on this side, not that side. But just thought I'd let you know that, a heads up. So these are two glues I use all the time. So bundle number 2 has the E-Block, the Pierce mat for stamping, I don't pierce, the Memento ink, Stampin' Dimensionals, and mini glue dots. And if you notice, I kept it upside down. That's so you store your inks with the surface of the ink pad down. This one is not made by Stampin' Up, so you have to turn it upside down. The packaging doesn't do it for you. All right, and I just stuck that to my block. Well, that was silly. Okay, so that's bundle number 2. Bundle number 3 has a couple of some tools I really, really love. So we had our starting point and for acrylic blocks, and our next one. In bundle number 3, I suggest block number B, so it's smaller, so it's 2 inches by 1.5. It's great for all those tiny ones. When you stamp, you really should try and match the stamp to the smallest block possible so that you don't get your block full of ink. So I recommend a block B. I also recommend something I use all the time, my Stampin' Up! Paper trimmer. And I'll hold it sideways so you can see it in full. So it has a cutting blade and a scoring blade, which is good for scoring a cardstock so you could fold it easily. So let me grab a piece of cardstock here. So this is half of a sheet of 8.5 by 11. So if I score it, I always keep my scoring tool at the top, my cutting tool at the bottom. So lift this up. The inches are marked. I would put this at 4 1/4. Line it up there, and you see at the 1/4 inch the lines go right across. So I would get it up there, score it. I always like to do it a few times, and then when you feel the scoring, there's a bump on one side and a dent on one. So that's referred to, the bump is the mountain and the valley is the dent. And the way you fold it is with the valley on the outside. So there's the valley. I would put the 2 corners together and then press down. So that, if I want to cut some cardstock, I have this stamped and I want to cut it out, I would put it against here. At either end, there's kind of a ledge or a lip on this, so you can butt your cardstock right against it and make sure that it's nice and straight. You don't have to worry about sliding things around. Oops, and I did slide that around because I went up. One of the tips of this cutter is, if you notice, I started by sliding away from the end. Don't do that. If this paper cardstock is against the ledge on this end, then cut towards the end. You can go back over it a few times, but start by coming towards it, and you get a nice clean edge. All right, so that's the paper cutter. And the last tool I recommend for beginning is for cleaning. It's a Sew Chamois. It's great for your photopolymer stamps. The way you work it is you run it under water and get it wet. You take your stamp that's full of glue and you just wipe it on that, and it's clean. Oops. And you can see it's clean, and just to be sure, I'll stamp it, and nothing is there. So that although this is stained from using some red ink on it, it is absolutely clean to use again. To clean the silicone mat, you just run it under water, squeeze it out till the water runs clean, and I let it air dry. So what happens, here's my mat, it actually will curl up and it'll be hard, but the next time you want to use it, run it under water and it's perfect. And if you also notice, this is half a silicone, it's not a silicone mat, half a Sew Chamois. I just find this a good size to work with. So the first thing I do when I get this, and they do arrive soft because they're in a sealed envelope, I cut them in half, and then I have two. So if this gets too full of ink, I'll wash it out and use the other one, or have two on the go. They're really, really handy. So Sew Chamois for cleaning with a paper trimmer and a block B. So that's my third bundle. So just pick the bundle or bundles that suits you best. Information on costs and all that is provided in a separate document. I'm not putting it in the video because that will change. And I just want to talk about a few items that are not on my list, but I use. Pair of scissors. I assumed you have scissors at home. If you're looking for new scissors for crafting, I love these paper snips by Stampin' Up. They're small, the blades are very sharp, and it's great if you want to cut out a stamped image for just curving around and getting things cut just the way you want. You have a lot of control. I love that. I have a bone folder. Mine is so old it has a very old Stampin' Up logo on it, but when you score your cardstock, like I did there, like I did earlier, I just use my finger. If you use this, you'll get a sharper fold, a sharper crease, which is always nice on your card. So I love my bone folder. I like the Stampin' Up envelopes. They're made from the same paper as, or similar as the basic white envelopes. They have a nice smooth feel to them, so they also accept Stampin' Ink very well. And finally, I use a different kind of glue. I use Stampin' Seal, which is a tape runner. So it, where's my, I don't know if you can see that. Maybe you can see this better. I have glue over everything right now. It just, it's nice and quiet. I'm very messy with liquid glue. And the thing that's nice about this is that if you're gluing towards the edge of your paper and you go off, it doesn't stick to it. It makes it go back on your cardstock. So for someone like me, that's a really good thing. So that's Stampin' Seal. But those are not part of the basic tools. I didn't include the paper snips because I thought most people had. So trying to save you a bit there. And same with envelopes. You can get cheaper envelopes elsewhere, but they don't have that nice smooth finish that accepts ink so well. Bone folder I didn't include because I didn't think of it. That's the only reason. And then my Stampin' Seal, because you either love it or hate it. So for a beginner, this liquid glue is much easier. So that's it for my packages. I hope that makes sense to you. There is a document that describes them and lists the items. And that's it. That's all you need to get started with stamping. So I'm glad you're here. See you at the next class, and let's have some fun with it. Thanks. Have a great day.